Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the December 17th regular meeting of Nanaimo City Council. And I'd first like to recognize that we're on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Goury. The question period sign-up sheets are in the usual spots near the partition wall between the gallery and council. And if during the meeting you have any questions relating to an agenda item, would you please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet, and at the start of question period, I'll ensure that those items, those who signed up, will be called to the podium to address council. And the first item on the agenda tonight is the introduction of late items, and I understand we have some, Ms. Goury.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So for late items this evening, Councillors Hemmens and Bonner both will have notices of motion. They've provided the wording, so when notices of motion come up under the agenda, they will read out their notice of motion. It will appear on the minutes for this meeting under notice of motion and will be on next council agenda under other business for their discussion. So when notice of motion comes up, they'll both be providing you one. As well, it's just a suggestion, but because of the size of the audience and the reason that they may all be here, it is suggested that council possibly move 10C above to be the new 10A, if council was amenable to that, and then you could adopt your agenda as amended.
Might I, in fairness, suggest that seems appropriate, although there are some other items we might want to move up as well, because I noticed delegations from other organizations, but I'm sure we'll move expeditiously through the evening and we'll get to all of them. Require a motion for that? So moved. Seconded, Councillor Turley. Any discussion? All those in favour? Contrary? Motion carried. Thank you. You'll remind me, Ms. Goury, of course, because I'll forget when we get there. So, a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Councillor Turley, seconded Councillor Armstrong. Any discussion? All those in favour? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. A motion for the adoption of minutes is circulated. Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Brown. Any discussion? All those in favour? Opposed? None. Motion carried. Thank you. Under the Mayor's report, there are a couple of things that I'm looking for support on. And
Your Worship?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you, but before you move on these items, if it would be possible to add Councillor Gesselbrock to item item B1, as well as C, he has requested. It's just not noted in these motions, so if Council wouldn't mind when making the motion if they've included Councillor Gesselbrock on item B1 as well as item C.
Any objection, anyone? I think that seems reasonable. What I'm seeking is a motion that I be approved to attend the Mid-Island Business Initiative launch on Wednesday, January 23rd, 2019, held in Vancouver. That is an event sponsored. Thank you. I'll just finish the explanation first. Sponsored by the Mid-Island Business Initiative. It's a launch to hopefully draw investment to the community, and I'm looking for my expenses to be covered. Moved by Councillor Thorpe, seconded by Councillor Armstrong. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And the second motion is to approve Councillors Armstrong, Hemmens, Thorpe, and Gesselbrock now to attend session 1 of the Local Government Leadership Academy Elected Officials Seminar on February 12th to 14th in Parksville. Do I have a mover? Councillor Bonner. Seconder? Councillor Armstrong. Any discussion? All those in favour?
Sorry, Your Worship.
Yes, sorry, Councillor Thorpe.
Maybe it's already been pointed out, but there is a correction needed on the dates. It'll be 2019, not 2018. Thank you.
And here I was looking forward to the time travel. I think we'll accept that as a friendly amendment. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. And a motion that Council approve Councillor Bonner to attend session number 2 of the Local Government Leadership Academy Elected Officials Seminar, February 13th to 15th, 2019, held held in Parksville. Is there a seconder? Seconder, Councillor Hemmens. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. And then finally, the Symposium on Water Stewardship in a Changing Climate, motion that my attendance and that of Councillor Gesselbrock to attend the Symposium on Water Stewardship in a Changing Climate, April 3rd and 4th, 2019 in Parksville be approved. Moved, Councillor Hemmens, seconded Councillor Martman. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carried. Thank you. Ms. Gurry, I understand we don't have any presentations, no delegations. We do have a room full of interested citizens, though, however, who have some items that are coming. Motion for the adoption of the consent items. So moved, Councillor Armstrong, seconded Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? None. Motion carried. Thank you. And council remuneration. Mr. Rudolph, please. Sorry. 10C. Yes, thank you. See, I told you I'd forget. Let's pull up Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. Ms. Mercer, you're going to introduce that.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program is a program aimed at creating long-term economic growth, building inclusive and sustainable communities, and supports low-carbon green economy. And currently, they are looking for projects that qualify under their community, culture, and recreation stream. So staff have presented council with a report that puts forward 3 projects that qualify under this grant. And they are the Youth Park in Harewood, the Port Theatre Community Performing Arts Centre, and the Maffeo Sutton Playground. Now, I just wanted to provide council with an update on item number 2, which is the Port Theatre Community Performing Arts Centre. The city has put forward $4.6 million, and that's committed, and we had informed you that we would be doing borrowing, short-term borrowing to fund that, and we still will. I just wanted to give an update. We have 3 options for borrowing under the community charter, and one is under section 178, which is short-term borrowing. And what we found when we went to fill out the application is that there is a max limit on that, which when we were in discussion with the province, they didn't mention that. So we are approximately $75,000 short to fund the full 4.6. So what we are recommending would be that we fund for $4.5 million through short-term borrowing and the rest from the Strategic Infrastructure Reserve. We also have 2 options under Section 179, and that we can borrow up to approximately $8 million based on the province's calculation. That's a cent free, which means basically we can borrow up to the full 4.6 without any electoral consent. And then we also have the ability to borrow the 4.6 million and go out to the public and get community assent on that through a referendum or an AAP process. So I just wanted to update you on that, just so you're clear.
Councillor Armstrong?
Yes, through you, Your Worship, to Ms. Mercer. Is that dependent upon them getting the infrastructure grant, or is that committed regardless of what happens with the grant?
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Armstrong, we have committed 4.6, so it's not contingent at this point.
Any recommendations, Ms. Mercer?
I would recommend that you do the 4.5 short-term borrowing and then take the rest of it out of the Strategic Infrastructure Reserve. But it's really up to you, whatever you want.
I'm looking to council for a motion. Yeah.
So if you pick that option, yes.
Yes. Councillor Martman?
Thank you. Through the chair, all 3 projects are excellent, and all 3 projects would benefit our community. But we're applying for grants here, and through the chair, if I can ask, what is the total grants that are being given for the province of BC?
Through Your
Ms.
Worship.
Mercer?
It's just over $100 million. So approximately our 15.5 million would be about 10%.
about 10%. And we're looking at that amount being distributed throughout the province. My concern, and I definitely support the Port Theatre Performing Arts Centre, my concern is that if we apply for a grant that is in the amount that we're asking for the Performing Arts Centre, we may end up with not getting any money. And that's what has me concerned, is working with something that's smaller where we will be granted it. And that's my dilemma in making my decision, so.
Well, I think instead of being dictatorial and trying to run this through too quickly, perhaps we should do the correct thing and actually hear from Mr. Halliday on behalf of the Port Theatre, the general manager. Mr. Halliday. Thank you.
Mayor Crowe, Council. My name is Bruce Halliday. I'm the General Manager at the Port Theatre. On behalf of the Port Theatre Board of Directors, our staff, the volunteers of the Society, I thank you for this time to address Council and our community around this exciting opportunity. We're here tonight to ask that Council support this community project being chosen as the City's application for the Invest in Canada Fund. We have a rare opportunity here to attract a large sum of provincial and federal infrastructure funding through this new program. A rare opportunity to create hundreds of construction jobs and many ongoing full-time and part-time jobs. Port Theatre has a proven history of bringing infrastructure money to our community, delivering valuable community service at a minimal cost to the taxpayer. The Port Theatre was built in 1998 with $8.6 million of federal provincial infrastructure funding at the time, secured by the Society, with the remaining $3.9 being raised by the Society through corporate and private donations. I might add, with the final $600,000 coming from the city, from gaming money to pay off the construction loan. The expansion project was set as a priority in the city's current cultural community plan. As a result of substantial community consultation in conjunction with the city in 2015, this project has been in the works for the last 10 years in its current scope and was part of the original vision of the Port Theatre. This project matches up with the criteria for this funding very well, showing clear social and economic impact and increased accessibility for the entire community. It is as shovel-ready as is possible. These new facilities are intended to directly serve our community, many of whom are here this evening in support. This venue will serve as a creative hub in our downtown core for rehearsal and production of work that is not suited to the 800-seat Port Theatre. It will serve emerging artists, developing artists, and a multitude of community users, and also be suited for fully professional groups with amenities that meet equity standards and are respectful and safe. Project will also have enormous social impact on our downtown by activating the Diana Krall Plaza. Upwards of 50,000 audience members, new audience members, entering and exiting through the plaza, creating a hub of activity for our downtown businesses. The RCMP have regularly and openly shared that there's far less street and crime issues when there's a Port Theatre show. With the new entrance off the plaza, we expect this effect to be greatly enhanced. The city's current allocation of $4.6 million was passed by resolution in 2014 and confirmed in 2016 by Council. The $2 million line of credit represents the Port Theatre Society's fundraising commitment through naming rights and a public fundraising campaign. To date, the Society has raised almost $600,000, just over $600,000 for design and engineering, and we have not yet touched our line of credit. This project has substantial contingencies built into the budget in the range of 20-25%, and also includes approximately $1 million in new US tariffs that may or may not be in place by the time of tendering. Our architect team, our cost estimators, and fantastic city staff have worked hard to ensure that we will be on or under budget. For some clarity, with the timing of this funding application being January 23rd and preparing tendering documents, construction for this project could not and would not begin in 2019, but can be easily completed in 2021. The city would not be expected to contribute the $4.6 million if the project does not have sufficient funds in place to proceed to completion. We ask that you support this initiative to leverage millions of dollars from our senior levels of government to create jobs and ongoing infrastructure in our downtown core. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Halliday. Questions for Mr. Halliday? Councillor Armstrong?
Your worship. You said that obviously there's going to be jobs during construction phase. Would there be additional employees for the Port Theatre once there was an expansion?
Absolutely.
How many?
So currently, some of the operating structure is yet to be confirmed, but right now our payroll is about 1.3 million, and payroll will go up by approximately $250,000. So that'll be a combination of full-time and part-time jobs.
Councillor Martman, are you reaching for your...
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you for the presentation. And I'm wondering, this may be difficult to answer, but would there be increased operating costs of the Port Theatre with the addition?
So I have been working on a very initial draft of an operating budget, and right now that budget shows a balance of revenue and expenses.
Okay, thank you.
And as of course time goes along, I mean, that's our intention, but absolutely, it shows a balanced budget right now.
Okay, thank you.
And that only works because we have an existing infrastructure of administration costs. We don't need to start from scratch.
Perfect.
Any further questions? Mr. Halliday? Mr. Halliday, thank you. I'm looking for a motion from somebody. Councillor Brown and then Councillor Thorpe.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. To get a motion on the table for discussion, and obviously the bigger item, that Council endorse the Port Theatre Community Performing Arts Centre for application under the Community Culture and Recreation stream of the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program.
Second.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. And Councillor Thorpe, next on the list to speak.
Unless Councillor Brown wished to speak to his motion.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Thorpe, and through you, Your Worship. Obviously, this is the biggest ticket item out of the three options, so I do think it's important we probably have some robust debate around that item first. Currently, I could be swayed, but I'm in support of this application because although I do think it carries a high risk that we would not receive the entire ask because it is a big amount, especially in proportion to the total amount of funding. If successful, I think it would be, the opportunity of 73 cents on your dollar is pretty rare. So initially,
Purpose covered sports facility. So we've put a lot of money into that one area. The Maffeo Sutton Playground is very tired and does need replacing. I have heard interest from some service clubs in town that they might be willing to partner in that endeavor. But the playground is there and it's still usable for the time being. For me, the pressing issue is the Port Theatre expansion. It's been on our books for many years now. I think it's a very, very worthwhile project to help revitalize our downtown, to stimulate the economy of our city even more, and I think it will have a lot of spin-off benefits. So for me, it is the most worthwhile project of the three, and that's why I support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I concur with just about everything, well, actually with everything that Councillor Thorpe said. And I'll take it one step further where I think this is the only project that actually supports people of all ages. The others are more youth-driven. This actually supports youth through dance. I know that the seniors that I know look very much forward to going to the symphony or different things. So I think this is a project that actually has a more effect for all of our citizens, not just like the other ones. They're great. I agree with the points made that we need to improve that, but there has been a lot invested in some of our youth projects, and I haven't seen a lot go directed towards seniors. And I do believe that this is a great cause, so I will be supporting the Port Theatre. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm also in support of this motion. I do have a concern, though, and that is I'm not sure if we have a Plan B yet. And the Plan B would be is if we get only some of the funding. So I have a question to staff, is in the event that we say get only $5 million, are we allowed to keep that and then continue raising funds for the next year or two, or do we have to use it up within a certain amount of time?
I will get you the information on when we have to use it up. But certainly, if we didn't get the full grant, that we would be coming back to council for a decision as to which direction you wanted to go, whether you wanted to continue with the project and find alternative funding or cancel it. I'll let Ms. Fulla answer the question.
We need name tags.
Through the chair to Councillor Bonner, our understanding is if they were to offer us less than the full request, they would come back to us to see if they could work out a funding arrangement with us. So they would come back to us, say, here's our offer, can your council work with that? And then we would come back to you with the offer under the grant program, and then council would need to make a decision if they wanted to accept that offer, but we would have to come up with the funding at that time for whatever the shortfall is.
And there's the crux of the matter, is if they do that, and say they give us $5 million, that means we have to find $10 million more, relatively short period of time. So I guess I'm going to support this because I think it's a great idea, and I think we should go for the big one. I'm just concerned that if they come back, we have to come up with X amount of millions of dollars to make up the difference, or else risk losing everything.
Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you. Councillor Bonner asked my question, so I'll just dive right into the commentary. That's that I actually thought long and hard about this one because the Harewood Skateboard Park, I think, is, as Councillor Thorpe pointed out, there has been a significant investment, but it's typically geared towards a younger crowd. And I think often youth in our community in the teen years kind of lose that built environment that keeps them active. And from a health promotion lens, we know that skateboard parks are successful in keeping people active, but also, and I can speak from personal experience, it really does create a sense of community. Between 6-year-olds on their scooters and 16-year-olds on their skateboards, you know, they're just good places. However, I know that the skateboard park is on the books for next year without this funding, so I also feel that the Port Theatre expansion would give a lot to our downtown. It would give a lot to a broader range of our community members. And so I will be voting in support of the Port Theatre expansion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Through the chair, I agree. I think that we should be going for, as Councillor Bonner put it, the big one. Just following up on his question, like say for example, if the province comes back and only says that we get $10 million. Are we able to, if we're not able to provide the rest of the funding, can we use some of that, can we use the money that's given to us for the other two projects or whatever that, or for one of them, the skateboard park or that?
Ms. Mercer?
Through your worship to Councillor Gesselbrock. The likelihood of us knowing when this grant is approved is anywhere from the summer to the end of the year. So if you approved the plan, the financial plan that had those two other projects in it and work began on those projects, it would be harder to cancel those projects. But I guess that's up for debate.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? I'll make a prediction. We'll hear about this before the October election. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. And thank you to the members of the Port Theatre Society for showing up tonight. Thanks very much. Back to item 10A. Yes, all right. Well, actually, Mr. Rudolph.
Your worship, here to your attention and seek your direction with respect to a sensitive topic, one that is awkward for councils to deal with, but nonetheless have the responsibility to deal with it, and it's the subject of council remuneration. Effective January of 2019, municipal council remuneration taxation regimes are changing, and the federal government, until this point, has allowed for a 1/3 tax exemption for council remuneration or salaries. And that has been always factored into the gross amount of salary allocated for councils in this municipality and other municipalities literally across the country. So this is not just unique to Nanaimo, British Columbia, or the province, but it's for across the country. So in various municipalities, staff are bringing forward a very similar report to inform council of this change and seeking, and generally recommending, I might add, that in order to maintain your net pay as is, without any increase or any loss, it would be necessary to gross up the salary allocation for the staff, for the council, to make you whole for this taxation change. Should you not approve this, then you would be effectively taking a significant cut in your council compensation. That's item number one, and that's the most significant part of this recommendation. The second recommendation deals with the annual cost of living adjustments to your compensation situation. Our current policy on council compensation states that at the beginning of every term, the subject of your compensation is to be reviewed by council, and that at that time it is possible to make an amendment to allow for annual increases. During the course of the last 4 years, there's not been any adjustments for cost of living for this municipal council. So you basically are working on the same compensation that you were in 2015. That's not something that staff would recommend from a good governance point of view that council practice. We are recommending some provision, an amendment to your policy to increase or provide for an annual cost of living adjustment of up to a maximum of 2%. We're suggesting the 2% primarily for budgeting purposes, but it would strike us as an appropriate number. It could be less. If it was more, then the ceiling would be 2%. The third recommendation in this policy, in this report, deals with the subject of all the issues that are attached to a council remuneration and benefits policy. And it is good governance, and it's typical that municipalities periodically review or have an external party, or actually it could be an internal review done to look at all aspects of council remuneration to make sure that for the next election that it's current and it is fair and it's transparent as to what the council that's being elected is coming into. In the past, this exercise could have been done, with the previous council. It was not. So there's a bit of a time gap in this exercise. The recommendation is that somewhere towards the end of the term, I'm suggesting in year 3 of your 4-year mandate, that a task force be established, a community independent, impartial, qualified task force be established to go away and do a review of the compensation for all members of this council and report back on your findings for implementation beginning the following council term. Could be sooner if you feel strongly that there was a gap in that process during this term. I've been through 2 of those with 2 separate municipalities, and both times it was awkward with the council, but both times they accepted the recommendations without alteration. And that was because the quality and the integrity of that group was unmatched. Typically you have a lawyer, an accountant, a qualified HR person, professionals, as well as community representatives, but make it a small, very focused group with some support from staff to make sure that they are furnished with the right set of information. But largely they would work independently. They'd probably take 4 to 6 months at the most to submit their recommendations, and then council would receive it. So there's really 3 parts to this report. Number 1 is to recommending that you maintain your net income at the same level moving into the same term. For this term, you acknowledge that there should be a cost of living adjustment annually as an adjustment to the policy. And the third is that you schedule or anticipate before the end of the term, that staff will be returning with a report recommending that a task force be established with the terms of reference for you to consider that would review the entire policy somewhere in around 2021. It sounds like it's a long time away, but it's not. So that's why we're bringing it here this evening and seeking your direction.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rudolph. Any questions before I ask for a motion? Everybody's afraid to move anything that relates to Councillor Bonner. There's the courage. And Councillor Thorpe, seconded. A discussion. Councillor Brown. No, we'll let Councillor Bonner go first as you move the motion, or do you wish to? No? Then Councillor Thorpe.
Oh, okay. I'll go first. Thank you, Your Worship. Through you. I'll support this motion, and I'm not afraid to, and I'll be happy to justify my voting on this. I think it's only fair that there is compensation for the 1/3 tax exemption loss that council will incur. Other councils throughout certainly the island area, if not the rest of the province, many of them have already tackled this with very little debate. I think the second point regarding the maximum 2% is fair, and that's certainly no more than any of our employee groups are looking forward to. My qualm is with the third point, and that is the independent task force. I'm prepared to support this motion, but I would prefer that the dates for this were moved up. I'm hearing that the last time there was a review of councillor remuneration was in 2015, and if we follow through with this recommendation, the task force, whatever their recommendations might be, would not take place until 2023. That's 8 years. I would prefer that this task force be set up next year with recommendations to take place in 2021. I'm prepared to make that amendment, but I would prefer to hear other councillors voice their opinions on this motion first. That's my stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I won't be supporting the motion for the following reason. Given the fact that we're proposing a 5.1% increase in property taxes this year, granted, full almost 24% of that is download from the province. I think we're asking our citizens to tighten their belts a little bit, and I'm quite prepared to tighten mine to show respect for that. I think this is something that could come forward next year when things are looking a little better, but at this point in time, I just cannot accept it.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you. I will be supporting this motion, and the reason I will be doing it is that I think during the campaign, a lot of what I talked about was creating an equitable and fair playing field for everyone and anyone who wanted to join council to do so. And I think fair remuneration, including getting our net pay back at the place where it was just 3 months ago, encourages folks who are maybe not retired with a pension, encourages folks who maybe have young families, mothers, fathers, single folks, to recognize that this is actually something that they can pursue. So for me, it's not necessarily about the dollars, and I recognize that it's uncomfortable because we do have a big tax hike on the books, but for me, it's about a statement about making this a realistic goal to sit at this table for anyone who wants it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Hemmens' comments about creating a government body that can be accessible to all if they choose to run and are honored with the privilege of being elected. So I will be supporting the 1/3 tax exemption change, but I think it's important to remember that that 1/3 tax exemption, the original legislation was to cover expenses incurred while elected officials do their job, and I think we do need to be cognizant of that. We do have some expenses covered for us as a council. With that said, I still support the increase and also the 2% based on Councillor Hammond's point. But I'm also in agreement with Councillor Thorpe. I would like to see that the task force begin the work sooner rather than later, because if we do believe it is work that needs to be done, then we should be comfortable with having it done sooner rather than later, so we can maybe influence our remuneration. The only thing is I think I would like to see a terms of reference of what that task force would be doing, before we just go out and say, let's create a task force.
Thank you. Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I'll support the motion as well, like some of my fellow councillors have said. The other thing that's realizing is that when you're running for council, if you're not in a position where you're retired but you're still working, is that the remuneration that you get from council often offsets the days off you take without pay. So there's expenses we incur, and there's also work we do which we cannot get paid from our day job for. So I support us at least staying at our net pay. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I will also support this motion, and I'm fine with the amendment that Councillor Thorpe has suggested. I look at this as something that we did talk about in our campaign, and as a matter of fact, it was the very first question I asked after I'd announced that I was campaigning, is that how do we lower the barriers to other folks entering politics? Because this is a fairly busy job, as we've already found out in the few short weeks we've been here, and it doesn't pay enough money for a person, say, who was a single mother and wanted to get into politics. So we have barriers, and this is just a small step to bringing down some of those barriers that allows other people to enter the political field. So I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. In light of the discussion, I'm going to recognize Councillor Thorpe to make the amendment that he's discussed.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you. I will make the following motion to point 3 of the original motion. My amendment reads that Council Remuneration Task Force should be appointed no later than 2019 and submit its recommendations for implementation, January 2021. So changing the dates from 2021 to 2019, 2023 to 2021. That's my proposed amendment, if there is a seconder.
Yes. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Brown. Discussion on the amendment. Seeing none, the question, all those in favor? Contrary? Motion carried. On the main amendment, we still have Councillors Bonner and Gesselbrock wishing to speak.
I already spoke.
All right, thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock?
Thank you. Through the chair, I support this motion, topping or bringing us back up to where we were before the 1/3 tax exemption was removed. I think it's important just to, have not a reduction to what we're being recompensated. The 2% is in line with any other group that's working for the city. And the council remuneration task force, I would greatly appreciate having a third body that's separate from everybody making these decisions and recommendations. So to the point, I think that it's really important just to reiterate the points that Councillor Hemmons and Brown brought up about having this be equal opportunity for all folks in the community to work here. I myself am not able to work. I'm working full-time now on council and not able to work near as much as my other job, and it's very important that I'm able to carry on my duties and run a household. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
I'm in agreement with what has been stated. I think it's important that we acknowledge what the pay is so that people know that this would take the salary for a councillor up to $34,975. So it'd just be a difference of $1,289. So I think one of the reasons that I'm in support of it, I'm in a unique position where I have an excellent pension. So for me, I don't have to rely on this as a living wage. There's many people that do. And if you look at what's happening in the States, I don't like to go down there, but it's a truth. Politics is becoming a job for those that are wealthy because most people can't afford to do them. So I think it's really important that the salary be attractive enough that you can bring people like the single mothers, single fathers, or one income person to the table so that we get that cross-section of people, or you could end up in a similar situation where the only people that can afford to run are those of us that have extra pensions or we're old and retired. So for that reason, I will be supporting the motion. Thank you. I'm not old and retired, I'm just retired.
Thank you, and unless I see someone else, I'm going to exercise my right for the last word. I have, and with my wife, both worked outside the home throughout our entire marriage, and I say this with no sense of bragging that we're comfortable. But I have always been conscious of the fact that many others aren't. And those who choose to engage in what I still call public service, and politics is most certainly public service, often do so at great sacrifice to their family time. If they can keep their families together, I can assure you I've recognized a high divorce rate amongst active politicians. And what is being asked for tonight is simply to ensure that those members of council, including the mayor, will see exactly the same paycheck next month as the previous council did for the last 4 years. So there is no increase to anyone. The only increase that will occur is up to 2% a year if there's a cost of living. And indeed, if the cost of living doesn't hit 2%, it's not going to be 2%. And if it's over, the council members will bear the reduction accordingly. With respect to the Independent Council Remuneration Task Force, it is to report back. It is not a final decision, and we will have to revisit that. But I think it is important that we recognize that certainly in my general experience, people who engage in public office discover fairly quickly that it is very time-consuming, and as I always say, it's not as tough as pulling lumber off the green chain for an 8-hour shift, and it certainly doesn't have the risks of the firefighters, who I happen to notice here tonight, in terms of life and limb, but it nevertheless is important work in our community, and we need to value our democracy, and paying people what I do not regard by any stretch as a very high salary for what they do is appropriate, and certainly I'm prepared to defend it publicly, and I think it's time we came to the vote, unless I've said something that arouses desire for anyone else to say anything. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Do you wish your vote recorded, Councillor Turley? Thank you. Very good.
Your Worship?
Motion carried. Councillor Bonner.
If I may say one thing, and I received my first paycheck when I was 12, and 50 years later, I finally see something that says some of my money is tax exempt, and even though I've only seen it for a couple of weeks, I'm going to miss it. I just want to...
Very good. All right, on to the Van Carlen exhibition, approval of lease for exhibition grounds. No? Oh, back to B. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Yes, the financial plan bylaw. Ms. Mercer.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report introduces the 2019 to 2023 financial plan bylaw for first 3 readings. So we presented the draft financial plan to Council on November 26th and 27th and December 4th and 5th, and we have updated that draft plan to include the changes requested by Council on December 5th and 10th. I can go through those if you'd like, just to, and otherwise just restate that the 2019 expected tax increase is 5.1%.
Do you wish to say anything further about the information that's up on the screen?
No, I think we beat this a little bit. I can go through the changes that we did add. A couple of updated information that we did add to it that wasn't a council request. We had added the Vancouver Island Emergency Response Academy operating revenues and expenditures. It's expected to have a small surplus, but it's not impactful to the bottom line. We updated the benefit rates, as well as we had updated information for grants in lieu, tax figures, so we've included those as well. And as well as, like I say, the changes made on December 5th and 10th. I don't have too much else to say.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move that Financial Plan Bylaw 2018, number 7279, to confirm and adopt the 2019 to 2023 financial plan pass first reading.
Is there a seconder? Second. Councillor Armstrong. Any discussion? All those in favor? Sorry, Councillor Turley.
Just get it on the floor.
So I'm beginning to feel like an 8-to-1 guy, but I'm going to voice my objection at this point in time. I won't be voting in favor of this for the following 5 reasons. First of all, 5.1% is approximately, and Ms. Mercer, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, is around 5.3 million. The downloads from the province are full 20% for the EHT, and we're also still paying for the MSP premiums to the staff. WorkSafe is about a 4% increase. I did the figures for the last 7 years of increases, and the largest one was in 2012, which was an increase of around 4.2%. Then following year was 0.1, and then it dropped down to considerably less than that, and about 4, and then 2, and so on. I don't think that if we were to accept this budget as it is, we're asking the public to, their citizens to probably have, even after taking off the download, to be paying an increase that's beyond most years that we've had experienced in the last 7 years. As I indicated in the last issue, we need to do a little belt tightening, and I believe that the easiest way to accomplish that is to spread some of these expenses out over the next 2 or 3 years, as opposed to trying to please everybody in 1 year. It's just, in my opinion, it's not feasible. And I wasn't able to voice my concerns on this last week, so I'm taking my opportunity to do that now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. Councillor Armstrong.
Well, thank you. I will be supporting this. I think we had very wholesome discussion. I think people put a lot of thought into what was going on. I also believe our previous budgets have not accounted for our reserve funds, which in asset management, which needs to be increased. We were 1.8 million short last year for what we were supposed to be at. We haven't looked at the cost of living increase, and inflation has not been accounted for in our last budgets. So I think I think Lanceville's looking at 11% increase. Other communities are looking at 6%. Quite a few are at 4.8, 4.9. So I think we are in line with what the majority of communities are. And I think it was really good, wholesome discussion, and I think it's a pretty decent budget. I know it sounds like a high raise, but I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you. I will also be supporting this motion. I think what I learned, growing on Councillor Armstrong's point, we really did have a lot of discussion and debate around this. And one of the pieces that I learned in that is that we're not nailing this in right now. We still have a few months to tinker with this. And I think as we become a little bit more sophisticated and nuanced in our understanding of how it works, not to say that we don't have that now, but we will have opportunities going forward to tweak it as we go. I also want to acknowledge that from my perspective, this rate, as uncomfortable as it is, seems like we're doing a little bit of repair work, and that feels necessary. And I also want to reference Councillor Turley's point that a bunch of this is a download from the province, the WorkSafe, the EHT. Those are not things that we could change even if we wanted to. So for me, uncomfortable, yes, I am one of those residents, we all are, that will feel this, but I do think it's necessary.
Thank you, Councillor Martman.
Thank you, through the chair. Actually, Councillor Turley's point is why I do support this budget, is because in the past, with the previous low increases they did have, it's put us in this position. If we want to catch up, have our public safety, our fire, our policemen, and move forward with projects, I don't want us delaying where we need to be. So I'm definitely supporting the budget the way it is right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll give my opinion now, although I think it probably should have been under second reading, but nevertheless, I will definitely support the motion, and I support this budget. I agree with Councillor Martman's comment just a minute ago that I think we are playing catch-up. And sure, nobody likes to pay taxes, and nobody likes when their taxes go up. But I think we also need to remember that taxes are levied to pay for services that the city provides. And the increase in our taxes this year are paying for services which we are catching up on. And many of them relate to very basic services such as fire and police protection, bylaw, garbage collection, and so on. I don't think there are frills that we are asking citizens to pay for in this budget. So I think it's a very defendable budget, and I appreciate Councillor Turley's comment, but I think I don't agree with the statement that he made that we're trying to please everybody all at once. I think there's a lot of people that we're still not pleasing, and we can't. But I think we've made a start to restore some service levels that are needed, and so I do support this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Councillor Thorpe is absolutely right. We're supposed to be doing this on second. But I'll continue along this vein. I also support this budget, and if you look at it in just terms of numbers, while it is 5.1%, 1% of that is asset management, which we desperately need. 2.5% inflation this year, which leaves 1.3% increase above that, and we are getting an awful lot for that money. So I would definitely be in support of this budget. I would like to see us tweak it a bit in the future and come up with, because we have a lot of plans or a lot of ideas that we'd like to do, and look at that, but I will be supporting it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. To my fellow councillors, just a reminder that the reduction in services did not happen in 1 year. It happened over probably 4 years, and I'd just like to remind you that it's probably wise to renew those services in a period of time rather than all in 1 year. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock.
I will definitely be supporting this budget. I do believe that we're playing catch-up. I believe that it's very reasonable. And I think that we are needing to restore services that people depend on. And I think there's actually an economic impact to our community if we don't have these services in place. Even simple things like parking and not getting the money that we need to for enforcing parking, in addition to having the right amount of staff for processing business permits. If we have long wait times in that department, it holds up development and holds up money coming into the community. So I think that these are important things that we need to be investing in. And taking into account that 1% is restoring our asset management plan, I think that it is important for us to be responsible in how we're dealing with our asset planning and management, and if we don't put that money in, it's going to cost later down the road. In addition, people pointed out there has been a large download from the province onto the municipality that we can't help anything with. So although it may be a bit larger tax increase that the community's been used to in the last 4 years, I think that we're getting closer to what a reasonable, after we have this increase, the following years it will be more what a reasonable tax increase is for a municipality that's being responsible. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to reply in reply to Councillor Turley. Like, I believe the additional firefighters are desperately needed. We have firefighters that are off with operational stress injuries, which increases our work safe as well as our overtime. So I think there will be cost savings with that. I think we're a growing community and it takes time to get these professionals to the table. So I think we need to do that now, not wait. Same thing with the police officers. The RCMP is now in the process of unionizing. If that goes through, we're going to be in a situation where we're probably going to have to hire 40 more police officers to make us equivalent to what the municipalities do. So the sooner we can start building these without having a huge increase, I think the better. And overall, it represents the increase is $150 a year. So you break that down over the year, it's what, about $10? It's about $15 less than that per month for the change in services to provide us with more firemen, more policemen, an active transport coordinator, which I wanted next budget, but I understand the importance of that. It was voted upon. There was really good discussion, and it's important to the community that we bring this forward now, as the fellow councillors had said. So I don't think we are being frivolous. I don't think we're pleasing a bunch of people. I think we're actually putting stuff into needs, not wants. Thank you.
Councillor Turley. Sorry, you've got there.
No, I'm on now?
When I punch over here, it puts you on, and when you punch it, it turns you off, so we'll all
Okay.
get used to this.
I didn't touch the button. Anyway. I think he just didn't want me to talk.
Never.
Your worship, through to Ms. Mercer. So the 5.1% increase is based on the 2018 budget or proposed actuals? Because we're not at year end, so.
Yeah, it's 2% or 5.1% higher than budget from 20.
From the budget.
2018,
Okay, so
yes.
that then opens up one other interesting piece of information, and that is that my understanding is a lot of the issues regarding staff reductions did happen in 2018, which would mean that the surplus probably will be more, I would assume. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in other words, what I'm trying to say is a lot of the possessions they're talking about are vacant now, and those vacancies occurred during 2018, however, they were included in the 2018 budget.
Ms. Mercer.
Through your worship to Councillor Turley, there are vacant positions through the city that do contribute to surplus. At the 2018 budget deliberations, there were some positions cut, so they are not in the budget, which therefore will not affect surplus. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, sort of. I'm just trying to get an idea of what the difference in staffing level was at December 31st, 2017 compared to what happened in 2018. In other words, is the budget figure for 2018 a realistic figure comparing to what the financial will state at the end of 2018?
I don't have the exact number of staff at the end of last year to compare to what we're expecting for 2019. Increase in the budget is about 1.4 million just for wages and that. I can get you the information if you would like for the number of positions that we had on and how.
Well, I mean, I can, obviously, I'm not going to win this vote, so it's, I'd be more interested in once the financials for 2018 come out, to compare that to what the budget was.
Yep, and we will get you that when we present the financial statements.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone, for a fulsome debate. All those in favor of the motion? Contrary? Councillor Turley opposed? Wish your vote recorded? Motion carries. Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move that Financial Plan Bylaw 2018, number 7279, pass second reading so that we can have debate on it.
I recognize Councillor Brown seconded, and I hate to discourage anyone from talking, of course. Please, discussion. I think we've debated this very well. Thanks very much. Any question? All those in favor? Contrary? Councillor Turley, your vote recorded. Motion carries. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move Financial Plan Bylaw 2018, number 7279, pass third reading.
Councillor Brown, seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Councillor Turley, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And now my anxious desire to get on to to get to the fair, so to speak. I think we're back on track, aren't we, Ms. Snellgrove? Yes. Vancouver Island Exhibition, approval of lease for exhibition grounds. Mr. Harding, you're going to present, please.
Your Worship, just asking Council to obtain approval for issue a 25-year lease, the Vancouver Island Exhibition Association, as per the report, and here answer any questions that Council may have.
Questions? Councillor Armstrong.
I'm just going to make a motion so we get on the floor. I move that Council approve a 25-year lease to the Vancouver Island Exhibition Association based on the terms and conditions outlined in the staff report, and authorize the mayor and corporate officer to execute the lease agreement.
Thank you. We have a seconder. Second. Councillor Martman. Any discussion? I think we can safely say we're all enthusiastic supporters of the fair. Question? All those in favor? Contrary? Carried unanimously. Congratulations. And thank you to members of the board and others who've come forward tonight. I think I speak on behalf of the city, given the vote, that we are all grateful for the continued work and look forward to the 125th anniversary upcoming. Thank you very much. Mr. Harding, you're on again for the Nanaimo Equestrian Association approval of lease for Bevan Park Equestrian Grounds.
Thank you, Worship. Very similar to the past, and part of the Bevan Park Master Plan and subsequent work with leaseholders is to obtain council approval for a 10-year lease for the Nanaimo Equestrian Association and lands of Bevan Park Equestrian, Bevan Park.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmens.
I'll move the recommendation that council approve a 10-year lease to the Nanaimo Equestrian Association and authorize the mayor and corporate officer to execute the lease.
Councillor Thorpe is seconded. Any discussion? Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you. I'll certainly support the motion. I would just like to express my thanks to both the equestrian group and the VIX group for their patience. I think these two leases go hand in hand. I think they are finally moving a project forward which we have been talking about and discussing and not seeing much motion on for quite a while. And that's no fault of our staff's, but I'm really pleased that we're at a point now where we can approve these leases. I think it's a very exciting step forward for both the VIX, for the Bevan Park Master Plan, and for the equestrian group. So I'll certainly support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Harding. So the lease, and I should have asked this with the VIX as well, but I'm sure the answer is going to be the same. Given that, particularly in the VIX's thing, the actual facility is only used a portion of the year, is that facility and will this equestrian grounds be able to be used for other groups as well?
Mr. Harding. You are now.
Your Worship, through the Council Turley and the Council too, this actually a reduction in some ways for the VIX and equestrian, so they've pulled back on some of the areas that they used to have, really to facilitate, and we should mention we're still working with two other groups, IPPC and the Island Roots, as per issues there, and other groups are coming forward as based on the overall master plan. I know it's a long way to get to your answer. Or your question, but the overall goal of the Bevan Park Master Plan is to see more use, more multi-day use or year-round use in all those, and all the organizations, VIX and Equestrian, very facilitated in that way of pulling back some of their areas to permit other uses coming in. And particularly the 25-year lease for the VIX building, it's a much larger building, eliminating the smaller barns. They have a lot of goals of a lot of use throughout the year for a variety of organizations that utilize the building if and when built.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. The next is 195 and 191 4th Street, letter of intent for lease with Nanaimo Search and Rescue. Mr. Harding. You're on.
There we are. Your Worship, this issue's been in front of council a number of times in different ways, as the report outlines. This is us, the city, working with the Search and Rescue Association. They've been looking for different locations throughout the city for a purpose-built building. They're now asking for a letter of intent to actually do a broader feasibility of the existing building they're in, which is the Harewood Fire Hall, Harewood Community Center. This letter of intent basically gives staff the authority to work with the association on more of a feasibility of staying in that building and looking at what could be done to the building to enhance it for their needs. And if that does work out, then we would come back to council with a plan for that and as well as a longer-term lease for them.
Thank you very much. Looking for a recommended motion. Councillor Bonner, seconded. No, you can't. I need a seconder. Councillor Armstrong, thank you. Councillor Bonner. That was. Is there any discussion? Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Worship, staff. I remember SAR's been here in the RDN on numerous occasions, and there were quite a few issues with the Harewood Community Center. Is that their last resort? And that's why we're back to the Harewood Activity Center?
Mr. Harding.
Your Worship, through
You're on.
Your Worship, through the Council Armstrong. I'm not sure about the last resort. I think, though, they are realizing with some of the funds that they have also that they're actually there. I think if they wanted to have one more look at this building to see if it could facilitate what they needed. We may still come back to you after working through some of these issues and saying, no, it can't provide them even the short-term needs, and we'd be back possibly looking at another location. But the current leadership of the Search and Rescue Club would like to see what they can do with this building.
Thank you.
Councillor Hemmens, I may have hit this a little hard and lost one of you, but we'll figure that out.
Thank you very much. Through, well, just a general comment, I had the opportunity to tour the facility a few months ago, and what I heard from staff is that while not ideal, with a donor on the line that is really looking to see that money work for NSAR, this is a good compromise, and they've engaged some folks to help them figure out how to do it best in that less than ideal environment. So I think this is a good compromise. I'll be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Harding, two quick questions. First of all, reading the report, my understanding seems quite clear that the Search and Rescue Group have decided, having explored other options, that this location in Harewood is their best bet that they can come up with right now. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And my second question is, it mentions in the report that there are other groups that occasionally use the building and they would have to be relocated, and that's something that we could do to other city facilities? Just wait a minute. There you go.
Your Worship, through the Councillor Thorpe, and thank you for asking. I was going to mention it again. As part of this review would be us working with because we do have some recreational uses there now, groups renting what is the remainder of the hall. Part of this review would be working with those groups to see other suitable locations, and we'd be reporting back to council on those issues also.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carried. Thank you. The next is property gifting, 603 Nottingham Drive. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you mentioned, we're seeking council's direction this evening on a proposed property gifting on the subject property. If accepted, this would gift property at 603 Nottingham Drive. Maybe I can ask if schedule or attachment B, sorry, in the agenda be brought up. I think it would be helpful. Sorry, Matthew, if we could have attachment B brought up, that'd be helpful. So, Your Worship, this is a portion along Cottle Creek. It's setbacks on either side of the creek that impact the...
Perhaps you could wait a minute. We're looking at the VIX grounds, which are interesting, but not the subject of the discussion right now.
No, keep going.
No, keep going.
Keep going.
There you go.
There we are.
Attachment B is probably more helpful. So the areas outlined, Your Worship, in they're supposed to be green, they look kind of yellow on the screen here, are the existing parklands, and the red are the areas in question that are being proposed for donation. This equates to about 1.4 hectares, which is about 3.5 acres. In this case, the applicants are requesting a donation receipt, and we've had an assessment done of the property value, so it would be a receipt in the amount of $70,000. Your Worship, there'd be some small costs to the city, approximately $2,000 for legal fees, and there would be a loss of about $196 a year in tax revenue, which is what we currently get off of that property.
Councillor Armstrong.
I'd like to move staff's recommendation.
Excuse me. Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor?
It's okay, it's not a big deal.
Sorry, no,
Okay, no, that's okay.
no. Please ask a
I just
question.
had a question for clarification. The tax receivable donation, is it, can that receipt, the receipt be used for parkland? I guess that's the clarification I was, because I know when you issue tax receipts, there are very specific items that money can be used for. I'm assuming parkland is probably okay, but I don't know that, so.
Yes, so we would. Sorry, through your worship, to Councillor Turley. So we would issue the tax receipt to the property owner, the donation receipt, and they would be able to use it. And my understanding is park dedication is one of those qualifying categories.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carries. Thank you. The next is Development Variance Permit Application Number DVP 365-125 Front Street. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Worship. Item H is the first of three items you have on your agenda this evening, seeking variances to our sign bylaw in order to allow for an LED or animated sign. We use those terms interchangeably, but it's basically to allow for a digital LED sign on the front of the Port Theatre at 125 Front Street. It's important to note there's variances to the size of the sign to allow a larger than normal freestanding sign, but if you look at the images that are included within your report, and I'd say those are probably attachments C, D, and E are the best to get a sense of the sign. It's really being designed in a way that it looks like it'll become part of the architecture of the building and not really reading as a separate detached freestanding sign. The criteria, sorry, the conditions of this and the following variances include requirements that there be static imagery maintained on the LED or animated sign, so that there's a minimum of 6 seconds between transitions, and there's also requirements for dimmer so that the light is not overly bright in the evening or in times of where it may be darker outside.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to speak to Development Variance Permit Application 365 in the audience? Can I have a... Please, sir, come forward and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. My name is Mike Kessler. I'm actually a staff member at Port Theatre. I'm the technical director, and I've been running this project. The animated sign, we're a 20-year-old theater in this province, and probably one of the only ones that doesn't have any way of advertising events that happen on a nightly basis. So the intent behind this is to actually have our community events put up in a way that the public can actually see that on a daily basis. With regards to the size variance, we feel that it's appropriately sized to mesh with the architecture of the building and the rest of the facade. And thank you, that's it.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the delegation? Councillor Armstrong.
I just wanted to know, sir, is there going to be any issues with traffic so that they're going to be looking at the sign versus keeping their eyes on the road?
That would not be my expertise. That has not been a concern from the planning department.
Through you to, I'll wait till it's staff's turn. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for the delegation? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, I had mine.
Sorry. Don't run away. Thank you.
If I may, through the chair, when it talks about the sign dimming between, let's say you're closed at 10 o'clock, right? Between 10 and 6, how dim does it go?
I'm told by our contractor it can dim to out, really.
Okay.
We have full control over it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Can I have a motion?
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe, seconded. Councillor Turley. Any further discussion?
Yeah, through your worship.
Councillor Armstrong?
Sorry, through your worship to staff, if Mr. Lindsay could possibly talk about if there's going to be any impediment to traffic.
Thank you, Your Worship, through Councillor Armstrong. Certainly, that is one of our concerns and why we do not allow LED signs outright in the communities. We think they should be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, certainly given their location along our major roads. The way we attempt to address some of those concerns, if you notice in the attachment A, which is the conditions of the permit, there are restrictions on these LED signs, if approved, that they basically not be allowed to be used for continuous video, flashing, or scrolling types of signs. So again, trying to discourage any type of signage that would distract drivers in that corridor, but instead having static images that rotate on a minimum of 6 seconds. So not having that, because of course these screens, Your Worship, they can be used just generally like television screens, and you can put anything you wanted on them, or a flashing distraction. That is why we've put those conditions in the permit.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Lindsay. Mr. Lindsay, I notice this and the next two items all relate to LED variances, and I'm quite happy to deal with them on an individual basis and look at each one specifically, but I also wonder if we are perhaps overdue for a review of our LED sign policy or amendments. And if I'm reading it correctly, the amendment was last done in 2011. Could you just comment on that? Is it something that staff has on their radar?
Time to get the lead out.
Sorry, Your Worship, through to Councillor Thorpe. Sorry, it's not currently something we have in our work plan for a comprehensive review of our sign bylaw. There are aspects of it that we have, that we are looking at, including rooftop signage and signage along the Nanaimo Parkway, for example. But at this point, we do not have anything planned to review LED signs. It is interesting, we have 3 items on the agenda this evening, but I think they're the first 3 LED signs I can think of that have come forward in a considerable period of time.
All right, thank you. I'll just comment that they do seem to be becoming overall more prevalent, certainly in other communities, perhaps more than ours, but I am quite happy for the time being to deal with them on an individual basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I suspect I'll be voting contrary to each of these applications brought forward, and I just wanted to express my reasonings. I think we already have far too much light pollution in our communities, and this may be a little romantic, but every time that we block out the stars, I think we lose an ancient connection that sort of places us in the world. I would welcome a review of the sign bylaw, as Councillor Thorpe possibly suggested there, but I just wanted to express why I will be voting contrary to each of these applications.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. As someone who remembers the 60s, I'm delighted you recall them as well. Any further discussion on the motion? Sorry. All those in favor? Contrary? Councillor Brown, do you wish to be recorded? Yes. Thank you very much. Motion carries. Mr. Lindsay, Development Variance Permit Application Number DVP 367 557th Street, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Both items I and J are applications from the Nanaimo School Board. In this case, it's an application for an LED sign on the subject property, which is John Barsby Secondary School. As per the previous application, there's also conditions in the permit to limit the use of continuous video, flashing, or other types of scrolling video on the LED signs.
Is there anyone wishing to speak to Development Variance Permit Application 367? Seeing none, can I have a motion?
So moved.
Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Turley. Any discussion? Councillor Gesselbrock. Councillor Bonner, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will vote in support of these things, but I'd like to possibly see if we can't change some of the conditions of this. They're both 2 schools. Schools tend to be out early in the evening, and I don't think we need to have them flashing up till 10 o'clock at night. I would rather see them up till, say, 8, and then back on at 7, as opposed to 10 and 6. Because they are residential neighborhoods, I kind of know why they want them, because probably it's easy and they can just type it into a computer and then it changes up. They don't have to send somebody up there to change it. But I don't see why it needs to be on all the way till 10 o'clock at night and on so early in the morning.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Yeah, through the chair, just running on the same vein. With the signage, like, is there a reason, are these LED light signage something new? Why we're having to ask for variances on them? Like, say if they're at the schools, and then are other organizations going to want LED signs, and do they create more light compared to the old signs? Or is this something that there's just a natural evolution in signage, and it's not going to create more light pollution and such? And just some information on that, please.
Your Worship, it's certainly not new technology. The LED issue has been one that communities have been grappling with for a number of years. I'd say the technology is probably improving, so the quality of the images may be getting better, but certainly LED or other movable copy signs have been around now for a while. The last time the city in its entirety looked at this issue, the decision at the time was not to allow LED signs outright because of some of the concerns that you've mentioned, that because of the lighting issues, because of the potential for distracted driving issues, that they should be evaluated on a site-by-site basis, and steps put in place with each to make sure that risks are mitigated to limit the impact on the community, and specifically if they're in residential neighborhoods or if they're in areas where crosswalks or other special attentions needed by drivers.
Councillor Turley.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Through to Mr. Lindsay. Do we know if this is in the same location as the existing readograph sign? And if so, do we know how long the lights are on in it during the day and evening?
Your Worship, my understanding is this is the exact same location as the existing sign. There's an image actually, it's attachment D, which shows the location. I'm sorry, I do not know the hours of operation of the existing readograph.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Just following up with what Councillor Bonner said, I think it's something we should seriously look at. I think I agree with what he said. We don't need those signs on super late and early in the morning. So is there a method that we could use to say that, you know, we'd grant the variance, but we want them, I believe, was it 8, you said? 8 to 7. 8 to 7, is that a possibility through you, Your Worship, through to staff?
Your Worship, yes, that would require a proposed amendment to attachment A. So if council wanted to make that motion and pass it.
Councillor Bonner.
Second.
Just for the sake of Ms. Snellgrove.
Yep. Amendment to the
Yes, so
motion.
this is an amendment to the motion.
In that case, I wish to amend the motion and change it from 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. They have to be off.
Seconded.
Second.
Councillor Armstrong. Any discussion on the amendment? Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate Councillor Bonner's points. I don't think I can support this amendment, though, mainly because I know that there's a lot of evening activities happen at these schools, and I think 8 o'clock is a little too early to have the signs to be turned off. I don't have a problem with the morning hours, but I don't think 10 o'clock is unreasonable in the evening. So I don't think I can support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bonner.
And just to why I was thinking that, the majority of the information on these signs generally pertains to school type of activities, which they would be for the students and parents dropping kids off and off, students. And so that would be done around 8:30 and be done by 3:30, and during 3:34 when you would be picking up students. So that's why I was giving them a bit of a leeway to events that are happening after dinner and that sort of thing. But in all honesty, at this time of year, that sign will be blaring away for the better part of 5 or 6 hours. That's kind of why I thought I'd drop it back to 8.
Anyone further? Then I'll offer my comments. I think there was probably an expectation on behalf of the school district that this would be an uncontroversial motion. And I share Councillor Thorpe's concerns, quite rightly raised, that we are encouraging community schools and the use of schools for much longer hours. They are public facilities paid for by taxpayers. And I think in the circumstances, particularly as there's no one here to speak to this, and given the obvious importance and the amount of staff time that's gone into this, and the fact that I don't think it's that much of an intrusion in a neighborhood to have the signs on, good Lord, have you driven around the community and seen all the Christmas lights that are on all night in town? So for what it's worth, I will be voting against the amendment. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the amendment? Contrary? Amendment is defeated. On the main motion, any further discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Councillor Brown, you wish to be recorded? Thank you. The 60s are speaking. Motion carries. And the next one is Development Variance Permit Application Number DVP 369. It's for 3135 Mexicana Road. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Worship. As I mentioned, this is another development variance permit application from the Nanaimo Ladysmith School District to vary the provisions of our sign bylaw in order, in this case, to allow for an LED sign, 3135 Mexicana, which is the Wellington Secondary School.
Is there anyone here wishing to speak to Development Variance Permit Application 369? Seeing no one, perhaps I could call for the motion. We can get into discussion. Councillor Turley, seconded Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion on the motion? I think we have beaten this to death.
Motion to call the question.
Councillor Gesselbrock has called the question. All those in favor? Anyone contrary? Councillor Brown, thank you very much. Recorded. Motion carries. Mr. Lindsay, Development Variance Permit Application Number DVP 372 124 Tate Road.
Thank you, Worship. This is a development variance permit for the subject property in order to legalize an overheight building. In this case, the building was built at 4.64 meters, which is 0.14 meters over the maximum 4.5 meter height.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to speak to Development Variance Permit 372? Can I have the motion? Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Bonner. Any discussion? Councillor Turley.
Yes, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Lindsay, is this building on any kind of a slope? Because a lot of the Cinnabar area is sloped.
Yes, Your Worship, there is a minor slope across the property, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Make any jokes about it. Sorry. I thought Mr. Lindsay was...
No, you answered my question.
I
think I said thank you.
I thought you were searching for something from the depths of your tablet, but Moses will not be delivering anything on the new tablet. All right, very good. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carries. Thank you. Development Variance Permit Application, DVP 373-110 Fry Street. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think Council may be familiar with this application as it previously received a development variance permit. So early, it was in January of this year, there was a roof collapse on the principal building on the property, and as a result, the building was no longer occupiable. The owner of the lands secured two containers that were refrigerated to allow his business to continue and sited them on the property. Ultimately, in March, Council approved a development variance permit to allow for a 6-month variance to allow these units to be retained. There were subsequently baffles that were put in around the storage containers in an attempt to address the noise concern that the community had identified. The development variance permit is now expired. I would note that the building permit has now been issued for the principal building, and they are working at this time on the repairs, and I've asked for a 4-month extension or additional 4 months for the development variance permit to allow the containers, refrigerated containers, to remain on site until such time that the 4-month period's up or upon final approval of the building, whatever occurs first.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to speak to development variance permit application 373? Good evening. Please come forward and identify yourself. Thank you.
Mayor and Council, my name is Doug Bender, and I live at 104 Esplanade. I am here representing the residents of our community, and I'm also a member of the South End Community Association, and a few of our members are here tonight. You probably remember that I spoke to you about the previous DVP 343 at the November the 26th council meeting. The deadline imposed by the previous council was for the removal of these refrigeration units by September the 19th of this year. And that was 3 months ago. They were supposed to be gone. And the sound mitigation that council had ordered the applicant to install was completely and utterly ineffective. Didn't do anything at all. So you must remember that the original bylaw was only allowed for a unit similar to this to remain on the site for a total of 30 days, once per calendar year. We are now in the 10th month. Now, the application has been submitted for a new DVP 373 to extend the previous DVT, which I've just mentioned to you. It reads, increase the length of the time, as Mr. Lindsay had said, for 4 months, or approval to reoccupy the industrial building at 106 Fry Street. So basically 4 months. But knowing the history of this applicant, who has already gone by his first variance application by 3 months, 4 months doesn't mean much to him, I don't suppose. The residents are very much against approving this variance, and from past behavior, this applicant has already proven that they have no regard for the bylaws. And we are also very, very concerned about the non-enforcement of the previous variance. Once again, we'll soon be getting into our summer season when we want to be outside enjoying our properties. Remember that the noise from these refrigeration units are generated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The units are portable, and the applicant does have other properties where they can be located. This is the 4th time that I appeared before council for our community regarding these variances, and hopefully this will come to an end very soon. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, sir. Any questions for the delegation? None? No. You just turned your light on, Councillor Bonner.
It's because I'm waiting for you to thank the delegation for coming, and then I want to
All
talk.
right. Thank you very much. Councillor Bonner.
At this point, I would like to make a motion. Sir?
Sorry? Councillor Thorpe was whispering in my ear. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this? Yes, please, come forward. Don't be shy. Good evening. You can identify yourself, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Jack Anderson. I'm from Green Plan. I generally represent sustainability projects, but I'm a consultant for a number of different contractors. And in this situation, I was the agent for the development permit for this project, which includes these refrigeration containers at this time. I just wanted to add a little bit of history here because I think there's some misunderstandings that are happening. It's a very unfortunate circumstance that we stand here today not having the warehouse rebuilt and occupied. There are refrigeration containers in that warehouse that we could occupy. And at that point, we will be moving those containers out. It costs the owner $5,000 a month for those retainers, or for those containers. He has no interest in them staying there any longer than he could. There was a reference here that we aren't respectful of the bylaws. And I can tell you that we have gone through every discussion with all of the staff members in order to be able to move this forward. This is an extremely frustrating circumstance in the sense that once we had determined that variance would be accepted subject to sound mitigation, we engaged with a local sound engineer who did studies on all of the locations around the facility. I believe you've seen that in the reports that were attached to my submission. The sound mitigation that was applied was in excess of $50,000. It took a long time to get that in place because we had to use special equipment that was imported from Ontario that would be able to withstand the type of weather that we have right now. In other words, it won't deteriorate in heavy rainfall. So that was placed around the containers to mitigate the sound. The sound engineers came back and did subsequent testing on there, and the reduction in sound at every location was a minimum of 3 decibels, which is considered to be equivalent to a 25% reduction in sound, according to the sound engineers. Of unique circumstances is that the original sound from them were coming in at around 50 decibels, which is considered acceptable in an urban environment. So despite the fact that the owner was encouraged by the sound engineers to appeal the need to even put the insulation in place, he proceeded to do all that was necessary. The unfortunate thing is that the city of Nanaimo, and it was interesting that you talk about increasing the budget so that there's more money that's made available for more staffing. We submitted our building permit, which is what we needed in order to be able to move forward. We submitted that in early June. When we submitted it at the desk, we were told that it won't even be looked at for 14 weeks. That was the backlog on work that was available at that time. When that worked itself through, it had taken up most of our 6 months that was available. We came upon some irregularities with the old warehouse that was there, in that we had to provide sprinkler systems. That required us to provide easements to the street, etc., and those all required being registered legally with land titles in Victoria. By the time the legal work was done, that pushed us into December. The building permit was finally issued in December. We've only been going at it for 3 weeks. With the grace of council, we asked for 4 months to proceed. Now, when I spoke to the owner in advance of coming here, he told me to mention 2 things. He said it was very important that council understand that this is a very difficult situation because we are right now playing the owner of this facility against the neighborhood, when the reality was all we all wanted was to get this done as soon as possible. The owner spent over $150,000 in security just in front of that place to keep it. So he has spent an absolute fortune, and his insurance is going to run out on the 26th of January, and he is now going to be responsible for all the additional costs. He employs 480 people on this island, and they all count on this warehouse as an opportunity to be able to move it forward. So it's a very unfortunate situation, but he hopes, and he has had conversations with other municipalities, that there are opportunities that when an act of God, the collapse of the roof due to heavy rains and plugged drains happens, that a municipality can consider fast-tracking it if it's going to be a burden on the neighborhood, a burden on an insurance company, and a burden on an owner in the community. So he hopes that maybe there'd be some recognition that council might consider how they may be able to fast-track situations like this that are uncomfortable for all. I'm open to questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. Anderson. On the March 19th meeting of earlier this year, you suggested that the owner wanted to proceed as soon as possible and that he expected to be done and in the building by June. But you didn't even get a building permit to the city until June. Can you tell me what caused the delay of better part of 3 months to get that in?
The biggest delay on that one was that when we proceeded to prepare the building permit drawings for it, we discovered that we had exceeded the payment or the amount of cost for the project, and that triggered a sprinkler bylaw requirement that the building be sprinklered. At that point, we had to reach out through the Mechanical Engineering Society to find mechanical engineers that would be willing to come on and take on our project. You can appreciate this has been an extremely busy few years in this community. We were able to finally get a local sprinkler engineer to prepare those drawings, but by the time those were done and coordinated with the civil engineers for the services, etc., that pushed us into the early part of June when we submitted for permit.
Another question, if I may? In your presentation, you also said or were suggesting strongly to the owner that they utilize a building block that you use to do the sound mitigation. And it doesn't look like that was, they took you up on your offer. Can you explain anything about why that wasn't done?
Councillor Bonner, I'm surprised that you would know that as not one that necessarily was on. I know Councillor Thorpe and Councillor Armstrong listened to that. I am deeply involved in a very, very unique and exciting building product that's out there, and one of its characteristics is it has amazing soundproofing. I made a recommendation that we could explore that because I knew that block would be accessible very quickly. What the problem was is that that is not considered an engineered sound reducing product at this time, and so the city staff advised me that they would not be able to accept that as a solution, and so we had to go through a sound engineer, and then the sound engineer had to find the appropriate solution to create mitigation around there. So as much as I would have loved to have been able to introduce the Just Biofiber product into our community, we'll have to wait for another day. And as mentioned, I'm hoping for a green neighborhood project in this community soon.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. I guess it would be the last time you presented, we talked about alternative sites. Is there any reason why we could not move those up onto, I think it was Victoria Road, for the 4 months to give the neighbors the break?
Right. First of all, the owner is currently just leasing a site from a business person. The area at Victoria Road was no longer made available to him. He actually had to leave that site. Was able to expand within the area that he currently holds his warehousing. If he could move that up there, he would do it tomorrow because it's a huge inconvenience for his staff to pick up some products within the main warehouse up on Kenworth Road where he's currently leasing, and then have to still go downtown to get access to the products that are in the coolers and the freezers.
And there's no opportunity to move those up there?
He knows of none, and this is our challenge, is that at this point, we're hoping and we're optimistic that we can finish up on this site with the mitigation that was provided so that we can get this warehouse up and operating. Now, the other thing he asked me to mention is that he knows that the roof is almost repaired. I don't know whether city is in a position to offer a partial occupancy because, as he said, if he could then, even if he can only access the coolers within there, he could take those refrigeration containers out. The coolers were never damaged. They're ready to go. It's just a matter of us being able to access in there. But I'm not sure how building inspection policy is whether they will allow us a partial occupancy of the building so that we could remove those containers.
Just as a follow-up onto that, I appreciate that. I think also probably WorkSafe would have something to say about that too, I'd imagine, based on what the city said.
Yeah, I know it might be relative to how they're placed within there and where the future work is, but it's something that we'd be prepared to discuss with the Building Inspections Department.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions of the delegation? Hearing none, thank you. I believe there's one further person wishes to speak to this.
Oh, I do have a question.
Sorry,
I'm
excuse me, sir, if you could just come back. Councillor Hemmons has a question.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the delegation, my apologies. The products that you brought in from Ontario, were they your only option for sound mitigation?
They were the only ones that we were aware of. Once they determined that we needed sound mitigation that would be able to withstand the weather, it was a question of where could we access them from. And Ontario was the only location that the provider was aware of that we could bring one up from. So it took us much longer than we had hoped to get that in place, but I can tell you that it was worked on a regular basis in order to get that mitigation in as soon as possible.
And how long was it from council saying you have 30 days to get that plan in place until you had them in? Do you know approximately?
Let's see, it was about 2 months, I think, maybe it's slightly over 2 months.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
No further questions of this delegation? Thank you very much, sir. Please come forward and identify yourself. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sydney Robertson. I live at 167 Irwin Street. I live fairly close to the property we're talking about, but I myself am not terribly affected by it. I did think that I would speak to you tonight, though, maybe to provide some neighborhood context, because there have been a lot of conversations in my neighborhood about this, conversations on the street and at community association meetings. So I've done some thinking about this, and you know, our neighborhood has a lot of points of interaction between industrial and residential uses. We accept that. We have trucking and playgrounds and seniors and sawmills and rental equipment and dog walkers, and we're all overlapping all the time. We have many industries and residents that work hard to be good neighbors to each other. Industrial neighbors were represented on our neighborhood plan steering committee, and we built respectful coexistence right into our neighborhood plan. The South End Community Association has a proven track record of working cooperatively with all the stakeholders in our area whenever possible. And I believe that most people in my neighborhood support respectful relationships between residents and industry. But respect needs to flow both ways. My neighbors are telling me that they don't feel their needs have been properly considered. We can all empathize with a neighbor who has a crisis on their hands, and of course, we cut them some slack, and that's happened. Omni Foods has been given a lot of grace, especially considering that they didn't follow proper process at the start. They've been given extra time and consideration from the city, and they've been given that same grace from their neighbors. I've got neighbors who have been losing sleep for months, and people who've been worrying about their property crumbling away, and they've abided by the process. So we're now at a point where we feel we need to insist on proper process, everybody playing by the rules. I've got neighbors who have thrown their hands up in the air. They think there's no point in speaking up because nobody will listen. So I'm hoping you're going to prove them wrong. I respectfully request that you either deny this application, or if you do decide to grant an extension, I ask that it be short. And I ask for clarity about the expiry date and what will happen, what action will be taken by the city beyond that date. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for the delegation? No one? Sure. Thank you very much. We don't have a motion yet. Councillor Armstrong?
I'll make the motion to get the issue to the floor. A recommendation that council, well, the recommendation that's outlined in the report, I'll make that.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Brown?
On to discussion.
Please, Councillor.
So having sat through this and being down there numerous times and heard all the noise, and the fact that they did not follow process, the fact that they built a fence without proper process as well, without proper permits and stuff, I have concerns about this. we're now into a year almost of the building sitting the way it is. I think that the neighborhoods have really worked to try and work with it, and it's not working. So for myself, I cannot support the variance request. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to staff, I have a couple of questions, if I may, regarding the permit. I'm looking for some timelines in terms of, we know that the building collapsed at the early part of the year. And in an answer to Mr. Anderson's question of how come I knew so much, I was actually in the audience during that debate, and I watched it again today, the better part of an hour of it. And so the permit came to the city, and it was, I think the term is, it was incomplete. Is that the case?
Your Worship, through Councillor Bonner, what I can confirm that the building permit, I think was already mentioned here earlier this evening, was submitted to the city on June the 4th. Given our volumes, by when staff had the opportunity to review the file, which was a number of weeks later, it was identified that there was additional information that was required. So there was what I would say is back and forth between the applicants and the city. But ultimately, the permit was reviewed, and the issuance date was November the 22nd.
And when you first noticed the discrepancies, when was the next time when did you inform the applicant that there was an issue, and when did they bring it back to you? Do you have those dates?
Your Worship, it's not just one date. There was a number of issues that went back and forth during the file. But for example, there was structural issues, requirements that were identified by staff in early September. Those were provided in late September by the applicant. But there was also other issues that were identified, including issues related to the civil works and services, and easements related to how the water chamber and the water meter would be accommodated on the property. So a lot of that was back and forth between the city and the applicant. It was not just one item that I can give you one date on.
And did the applicant ever come to you, other than just recently, asking for an extension when they knew that they were already past the date? Like when did the application come in for an extension?
I'm sorry, I don't have that date in front of me. It was just within the last few weeks that we received an updated application. We'd certainly been in discussions with them throughout and urging them to either comply or to submit a new application. But we brought it here to council, or put it on your agenda almost immediately after receiving the application this time.
Thank you.
Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Lindsay. When the initial containers were placed, that required a variance because we allow one container and of a certain size. 2 containers of a different size were placed. I'm curious whether that placement happened before the variance request.
That is correct, Your Worship. Happened prior, yes.
Okay. Secondly, to Ms. Robertson's point, if we decide to grant a 4-month extension, what kind of recourse will we have at that point if compliance is still not met? What would be reasonable?
So if I understand the question, so if the variance is granted and we get to the end of the 4 months and the building's not completed, but the units continue to be there, so they would be in violation of the development variance permit, would be at that point, if there was no response, then enforcement action would need to follow. And that could be in the form initially of possibly ticketing, but more likely if there was an applicant, in any case, I'm speaking generally, if any applicant was not willing or prepared to comply, then it could ultimately require court action to obtain compliance.
Okay, thank you. And if I may, just my thoughts on this, and that's that I'm struggling a little bit because what I'm hearing from the community is that this is really not working for them. Like, to hear that people are not sleeping is not okay. But I'm also hearing that the business feels that they're doing everything in their power to accommodate the neighborhood. We have a local island-owned business. And And then we have this kind of back and forth that I don't really understand between the city and the business, and kind of what was on our desk, and what delays did we experience internally versus what could have been what was on their end. So I'm just sharing that to say that I'm finding this quite a murky issue. However, I personally feel very compelled to vote against the extension simply because the community has, I've seen them come to the podium again and again and again. And I think they've had a lot of patience and a lot of grace. So that's all I have to share. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question through staff. And most of them have been answered by other councillors' questions, but so there was a series of not complying with the bylaw, is that correct? And then coming in to ask for variances?
So originally, the units were in place. Subsequently, a variance application was made after the units were in place, and council granted that in March. And as has been mentioned here earlier this evening, that variance permit then expired. So for the past number of months, they've been not in compliance on the site. The original variance expired, so there are no exemptions to the bylaw, so they've been not in compliance, and they're here tonight to either seek council's request for a new variance, which would again put those units in compliance for 4 months. Alternatively, if the variance is denied, then the units will not be permitted yet.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. This, I recall, being a very difficult decision when it first came in front of council, and it continues to be. And I absolutely have sympathy for the neighborhood and the delegation that appeared, and we've heard them several times. And I think their concerns are very legitimate. I also have compassion for the business owner, a local business, and I accept that part of the delay in this process was due to the time it took to get necessary city permits. And that's unfortunate, but that's just the way it is. I don't know if there's any room for compromise here. At this point, my inclination is to not support the variance. I just remember when it first came in front of us, we were given this wonderful assurance that the sound mitigation would be almost absolute, and that never did materialize. And I acknowledge that there has been some attempt, but I don't think it has been enough to satisfy, well, obviously it hasn't been enough to satisfy the neighborhood. I'm not sure it's been enough to satisfy me. If this was a 2-year extension, 2-month extension on the variance, if that I thought would be time to solve this problem, I would consider that. But I don't want this to go into another spring. So I'm open to further comments from my fellow councillors, but at this point, I do not believe I can accept this variance request. Thank you.
Councillor, some of you are either punching your buttons and disappearing off here or whatever, but I have Councillor Armstrong next.
Through you to staff, we heard the delegation speak about the fact, could they go into the building sooner than later? Is that a possibility? Like, I can't remember the term you used, I'm sorry.
Your Worship, I think the reference was made to partial occupancy of the building. There are cases from time to time where we are able to do that, and I'll say that staff will make every effort to get the building up and running as quick as possible. I'm not sure in this case that partial occupancy of the building will be required, because we'll be looking for all the major components of the building to be completed before we were able to allow for it, but certainly staff would make every effort.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I do struggle with this one as well. But with consideration, I think, given to the community and understanding that they are quite receptive to making things work, and I think the general sentiment that the corporate, there hasn't been a good corporate citizen trying to mitigate this, I cannot support the extension of this variance.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm leaning towards also not accepting this extension, and here's my reasoning for this. As a businessman, I understand that businesses sometimes have problems, but I watched the meeting that took place on March 19th, and there was a genuine, what I thought, a genuine effort by the company to get this done ASAP. And I just don't think that that's been found, like that's been taken place. And what council did back then was they gave the company all that they had asked for, and then they told the neighborhood, you're going to have to just live with it. And the only option they had was that this sound mitigation was going to be put in. And I think I think we've done a disservice to the neighborhood by allowing it to take on as long as it has. Had the application permits been put in early and things been done around June as was promised to this council at that time, I would be in a different mindset at this point and say, well, things happened, right? But in this particular case, I think we've asked too much of the neighborhood, and in a partnership, in a family, you have to have a bit of give and take. I just think Omni Foods has outrun their time.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. So my concern is how extensively the company has been looking for an alternative location for the units. So I'm wondering if an amendment maybe precipitate more vigorous, how can I put it, desire to find another location. So if we were to change it from 4 months to 1 month and add a clause in there that they have that time to either have the thing completed or have the units moved to another location, whether that's something that might be worth considering. And I can move that amendment, but I'm not convinced anybody will second it. But
Ms. Snellgrove, has what Councillor Turley said capable, no offense, of being...
Sure. So my thought is to make an amendment to the variance that we change the 4 months to 1 month and add a clause in there that they either have the building occupied, be able to be occupied in that time so that the units are no longer necessary, or they have another location to move the units to.
Mr. Lindsay.
Your Worship, I think there's part of a motion and part of a rationale in there, and I think the motion would be, if I understand, is simply the time frame to reduce it from 4 months down to 1. I don't think the rationale you would need to have in the motion, or sorry, in the actual conditions. By reducing it to a month, what you're really saying is, because the building won't be ready in that time, you're saying basically is you have a month to keep them on site, and our expectation is at the end of the month you'll remove them or relocate them. That's up to the property owner.
Well, and the other potential is if they are able to get an ability to use the coolers that are on site already, then they won't need the units. So it gives a bit of impetus to city staff to hopefully find a way around that. So, thank you.
Do we have a seconder for Councillor Turley's motion? Seeing none, back on the main motion. I have Councillors Thorpe and Bonner and Gesselbrock all in order.
Thank you, Your Worship. I did have a question through you to Mr. Lindsay, and it had to do with the timeline and related to Councillor Turley's attempt at an amendment. I had earlier mentioned I might be prepared to support 2 months, but would even that, Mr. Lindsay, be realistic in terms of solving the problem? Or is that futile as well?
Your Worship, we landed on 4 months after having a discussion between staff and the applicant of how long we thought the reconstruction was going to take. It is kind of an unusual number. We would normally come to sort of 6 months or a year, but we tried to make it as small as what we thought possible and still allow for reasonable time to actually get the building completed. But
All right.
4 months is what we felt was necessary.
Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. Lindsay. So what would be the process if this application wasn't granted? They would then be in non-compliance, and what would be the timeline? And the reason I'm asking this question is the impetus is now on the company to either get this place fixed and get access to their coolers or find a new location for their coolers. So if they're in non-compliance, then how long would it take us to enforce that to the point where they could be taken off the property?
Well, Your Worship, that's somewhat of a difficult question because effective immediately, they would not be in compliance. And I'd have to make a bunch of assumptions there that so my first assumption would hopefully be that they would then understand that and make themselves in compliance by immediately moving to relocate the containers. But what I think you're asking is if they decided not to, I think it gets back to the Councillor Hemmons' question I think earlier, is what would be the options? And our principal option is enforcement. And I think we would have to have, as with any file, we probably have to have discussions with council on how best to proceed. And if those are legal questions, those are often in-camera deliberations about how to proceed with enforcement files.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Through the chair, as a resident of the South End and hearing about this issue for quite some time, I appreciate the patience of the community. 3 nights of poor sleep as a result of a noise is enough to drive somebody crazy, let alone a full year. And I get the urgency of dealing with this matter. Hearing Mr. Anderson speak about the process of sound mitigation and delays in the building permitting process with the city, and then engineers and such, it does take a long time to repair a situation in industrial settings. I would like to have a solution-focused council and city, and also one that really respects communities. And I'm hoping that there's a way that, I'm curious just what the South End community would be okay with. Is 4 months reasonable to give a company time to repair the roof and deal with the refrigeration? And when I hear that a business has been disrespectful in the communication, I mean, it would be nice if there is this issue in the community that the business is keeping the community updated regularly at the South End Community Association meetings for accountability and to let people know about the process, because the South End isn't unreasonable if people are informed that there is progress being made. So either progress isn't being made and the business is being unreasonable and hasn't gotten their act together to get this problem thing, or there isn't communication to let people know about the reasonable process of fixing the situation. And so I'm just curious what other, options that there is. Thank you.
Lindsay, can you respond to that?
Your Worship, I think the principal options are, of course, you either approve or deny the development variance permit. I think what I've heard some council members discuss is this third or modified option is something in terms of the time frame, and that's the only other option or variance to options that I can suggest.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Worship. One of the concerns I have is that this variance expired end of August, beginning of September, and it's now just becoming forced now in December. If they were that concerned, and I believe they should have came here sooner, and we could have had that time frame to start working with them to try and find solutions, but we're now 3 months past the expiry date, and this is the first we're hearing of it. So that's a concern. Second concern I have is they knew that they were going to have to get a building permit. Why wasn't that done sooner than June? And I think that's sort of been addressed. You're going to have to get a new roof, so why can't you start the application process sooner? So that's a second concern for me. And the third concern is they know, and those that watch the meeting know that we asked them to look for alternative locations, and I don't know how hard they looked for them. I do know they tried it first, but has there been any further tries? And when we sat at that meeting, I was thinking for sure that we were going to get great sound mitigation. We didn't get that. So The biggest concern I have is when that variance expired, I would have expected them to be before council within at least a month, not 3 months, to try and deal with the issue. Thank you.
Councillor Hemmens?
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, to staff, I'll be brief. Going back to my earlier question regarding the 2 containers, both of them a little bit larger than bylaw would have allowed, how long did it take for the company to come to the city and say, we've placed 2 containers because that was necessary, and they're larger than the bylaw allows, and we're requesting a variance based on that? Was that a large window? Was that immediate?
Your Worship, so I don't recall the amount of time, and to be honest, I can't recall if it was a response to a complaint that was received, but I would just say that staff became aware of the units had been placed without the necessary variance or permits, and the result was an application was made after they were cited. I'm sorry, I don't have the time frame for that.
Thank you.
I am going to take a position that is contrary to the majority, it appears, of members of council. The owners in this case did not ask for the roof to collapse. Having been involved in practice over the years in many difficult situations where there are competing interests involved, I appreciate that their behavior may not have been exemplary, that they may not have responded to demands from the city, that they may not have complied with the laws and the bylaws as quickly as one would hope and should. But this is an operating business, employing people, trying to operate in our community, having to survive. I am much moved by the fact that this is a recommendation of city staff who've had to deal with this issue. When I hear, and I do not fault city staff for this, that it takes weeks into months to get a permit granted, when I'm told that the owner discovers that they then have to supply a sprinkling system, which is no small expense, and all the other expenses attendant on this, I'm conscious of the fact that it is a disturbance to the neighborhood, and as many of you know, I have enormous sympathy and respect for the people of the South End Community Association and the incredible neighborhood it is within our community. But I am not convinced by the evidence that I have heard tonight, or the information I've received is more properly speaking, that this has been an absolutely flagrant ignoring of the city's requests. They've been engaged in a long and apparently ugly process trying to determine what materials were suitable in order to meet the sound mitigation requirements. It appears that there is information to indicate they looked for other sites. I think you have to respect the fact that they have an existing facility in operation, which is a significant capital investment, which is not producing anything for them right now. I would rely on their own self-interest in these circumstances for them to pursue repair and reconstruction as quickly as they possibly could, because I have no doubt that the presence of these units is an expense to them. It's not been stated, but I think it's a fair assumption to make, that they're having to pay for these extra units in order to provide the same kind of refrigeration that they required from their former facility, which is sitting there at the present time, the subject of an expensive repair and costing them money. So again, as much as I'm sympathetic, I will in fact support the recommended motion as recommended by our city staff. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Gesselbrock.
Through the chair, is there anything that we can put in place that after, if this 4 months extension is granted, that's the deadline? Like, there's no more variances, or the city will take action to remove the refrigeration if it's not done? Because I think, if the South End and the neighbors can be assured that this 4 months is the last 4 months and that's being taken seriously, that'll be the start of spring, windows will be open, and if the business owner checks in with the community association on, updating them on progress, is there something that we can give the assurance to the community?
Mr. Lindsay.
Your Worship, by putting a time frame in the development variance permit of 4 months. I guess that is the assurance that at the end of the 4 months, the expectation is that this would be remedied. I think it would be, I'm not sure you can put a subsequent motion that says we will not consider any further variances. I think you have to weigh each application on its own merits when they come forward. So I don't think you could fetter your discretion in that way looking forward. I think the message that I've heard this evening, and I think that we would communicate back to the applicants, is if council passes variance, was that at the end of 4 months, we expect those units to be gone one way or the other.
No further speakers? All those in favor of the motion? Contrary? Motion is defeated.
Excuse me, Mayor Krog, could you please say the names of those opposed?
Councillors Armstrong, Hemmens, Thorpe, Brown, and Bonner. Thank you. You'll get me trained yet, Ms. Snowden. Item M, the rezoning application RA 000404-5, 5400 Dewar Road and 5431 Redmond Road. Mr. Lindsay.
Excuse me, Mayor Krog, we did miss our 9 p.m. recess, so I recommend that we take a recess now before moving on to the next item, but it is council's pleasure.
Sorry, you'll have to speak up. So we've missed our 9 p.m.
Recess. We have a scheduled recess at 9 p.m. We've gone past that. If council would like, we can take a break
I
or
just
continue on.
dictatorially want to push council ahead constantly. I do apologize. Shall we take a recess then? I'll get used to it. 10 minutes? Thank you.
There will be a new decorum statement read out at the start of each meeting to ensure proper decorum is taking place and to assist the chair in his duties. So the proper rules of order and the decorum will be as follows. There will be only one speaker at a time that will have the floor as directed by the chair of the meeting. There will be no interruptions or call-out comments while another person has the floor. Anyone speaking out without having been acknowledged by the chair will be found out of order. If that person does not refrain from speaking without having been acknowledged by the chair, then he or she will be required to leave. For the members of the public speaking, the comments need to be respectful and constructive. Discriminatory or defamatory comments or comments that are in the nature of harassment will not be tolerated, and anyone engaging in such communications will be found out of order. Some examples of behavior that won't be tolerated at a council meeting are as follows. 1. Harassment. In terms of comments about city employees, employees of the City of Nanaimo have a right not to be subjected to discriminatory or defamatory comments or personal attacks against their competency or character. All speakers must refrain from such comments about identifiable staff. Comments should be limited to issues regarding the city's policies or operations. Number 2. Section 7 of the Human Rights Code prohibits a discriminatory publication because of race, color, ancestry, place of origin, religion, marital status, family status, physical or mental disability, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, or age. Discriminatory comments will not be tolerated. Number 3, defamation is publication about a person that tends to hurt that person's reputation. Defamatory comments will not be tolerated. Please stick to known facts and keep the dialogue respectful and constructive.
Are you tired of dragging the garbage out? They just don't make them like they used to. It's a saying that doesn't really apply to garbage cans. Yes, young man, you seem ready for a new garbage and recycling experience. Take a look at the new green, blue, and black carts right behind you. Yes, exactly. Oh, I see your confusion. I can fix it. Go ahead, give them a try. Pretty easy to roll, right? Did you know that a set of these carts will be delivered to every house in Nanaimo as a part of the new Sort, Toss, Roll program? It's designed to make it easy for you to sort your waste, toss it into the correct cart, and roll it to the curb.
3 carts will be assigned to your home, but the city actually owns them. This way, the city will maintain responsibility for repairing and replacing the carts when it's needed.
Wow, you really are happy about this. There are a few things you need to know before you start wheeling your carts to the curb. Are you ready? Great, let's get ready to sort, toss, roll.
Yeah!
Did you think that this was a silent video? Well, now that you've found your voice, why don't you narrate this next bit?
The new Sort, Toss, Roll automated curbside collection program is coming to Nanaimo in 2 phases. Phase 1 is being rolled out to central Nanaimo now. Sort, Toss, Roll will come to the rest of Nanaimo in the summer of 2018. Carts will be delivered and placed at the end of your driveway, yard, or curbside. This is how you should place your carts on collection days. An information package will be left for you, further introducing you to the new program, with information spanning from instructions on how to place your cart on different types of streets to options for cart upsizing, or details on what goes into each cart.
Wow, you really know your stuff. Tell me, why are there 3 colors of carts?
Well, this one is for organics, this one is for garbage, and this blue one over here is for any recyclables.
Very good. Now, what goes into the blue recycling cart?
Cardboard, plastic containers, milk jugs, cans, or anything that used to go into the yellow recycling bags.
Now, David, what goes into the green cart?
The green cart is for your organics, any compostable food, pizza boxes, or napkins. Anything that used to go into the old organics bin.
And?
And what?
I'll give you a hint.
Yard clippings.
Yes, the new green cart has plenty of room for grass and weeds. Now, what about the black cart?
Easy. That one is for garbage. Any waste that can't be composted or recycled. But what if the carts aren't big enough?
Well, the city of Nanaimo has an exchange program in place. Homes that have more demand for recycling and household waste can upsize their carts. That reminds me, anyone that has questions about the Sort, Toss, Roll program can call the hotline or visit our webpage.
The standard 240-litre blue recycling cart can hold 3 times the amount of recyclables as your yellow bag, and it won't blow away in the wind. The 120-litre green cart can hold 3 times as much as your old green bin, and the 120-litre black bin is about the size of 1.5 garbage bags. And now, you won't even need to buy those black garbage bags.
Are you going to get that?
I probably should. Take over for a bit, will you?
Okay.
Excellent. Thanks.
Hang on. Let's try this. Sort, Toss, Roll is a new way of doing away with waste. New trucks are a big part of the program and come equipped with an automated arm to lift, dump, and replace the carts on collection day. The trucks are efficient. Each truck has 2 compartments and can pick up both your weekly organics and your recycling or garbage. They are also fueled by compressed natural gas, so they are green too. And the trucks are safe. Our waste collectors no longer need to lift the cans manually. This means far less injuries on the job and happier workers. The new trucks are awesome. The arms can reach out up to 10 feet to pick up the carts. It is important you place them properly on collection day, though, to make sure that your waste and recycling can be picked up. How you place your carts depends largely on the type of street your home is on. If your street looks like this, with a sidewalk divided and set in from the curb, place your carts like this. If your street looks like this, with a sidewalk and a curb as one, place your carts like this. If your street doesn't have a sidewalk or curb, place your carts like this at the end of your driveway. And finally, if you have a curbed sidewalk but can't place your carts behind the sidewalk because of a wall, ditch, or fence, place your carts like this in front of the curb. Always remember to place your carts 1 meter apart to allow room for the automated arm, and point the arrow on your cart legs towards the street. In the occasional neighborhood, there are other factors that may affect how you can place your carts, such as street parking or steep hills. The City of Nanaimo will find a collection solution for every situation. It may not look like it, but there's technology in the carts. Each cart has a digital ID tag, which tells the truck which house it belongs to and whether it's the recycling, organics, or waste cart, so that it gets dumped to the right compartment at pickup.
Contamination happens when things that can't get recycled get tossed into the blue cart. Styrofoam, plastic bags and glass can't be accepted at the curb. The automated sorting machine at the recycling facility cannot process them. This means contaminated loads of recycling end up being sent to landfill. So do your part and recycle smart.
Sort, toss, roll. It's easy, efficient, green, clean, and safe.
I was going to say that.
Go ahead then.
It's easy, efficient, green, clean, and safe.
That about sums it up.
David, time for dinner.
Don't worry, we've covered a lot today, and if people want to learn more about Sort, Toss, Roll,
call the hotline, 250-756-5390.
Come on, David.
I've got to go.
What was that number again?
250-756-5390.
5400 Dewar Road and 5431 Redmond Road. Mr. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm actually going to take this opportunity, if it's okay with yourself and council, and introduce the next two items, because it's very difficult not to talk about them together, because they work together in terms of ultimately a road closure and rezoning to allow for the ultimate subdivision of the properties. And maybe to help me start with explaining the application, maybe on item M, if I can bring up attachment B, might be helpful. Thank you. So this is the current situation out there with, there's two titled properties, 5351 and 5400. And as you can see here, 5400 is zoned R1, single family, and the balance of the property, 5351, is zoned R10. In addition to the two properties, there's an undeveloped, unconstructed City of Nanaimo road right-of-way, referred to as Redmond Road, which runs down the west side of the property and along the north edge of the property. So if you move to attachment C, it shows the ultimate intent is to for the property owner to realign the property boundaries and ultimately create 5 lots, each of which would ultimately allow for a duplex. So but in order to do that, you can see that subdivision as you presented right now, you'd end up with lots 1 through 3 as actually being split zoned or having different zones on those properties. So the rezoning application, which is the next attachment, attachment D, if adopted, will rezone the front lots 1 through 5 as R10, which is our steep slope zone, and rezone the balance of the property as park. Your Worship, as I mentioned, there's an unconstructed portion of city road right-of-way. And if we actually go to the next item, item N, and pull up attachment C, I think we can best talk to the road right-of-way.
I take it, Mr. Lindsay, that the dedication for this road was done a long time ago.
Your Worship, it would be pre-amalgamation, yes.
Sorry?
Pre-amalgamation.
And when you say amalgamation, you mean back in the days when town site was separate and?
Yes, so it would be prior to 1976. Thank you. This helps. So the road closure area. So there's 2 areas, Road 1 and 2. So the proposal here is to close the road. The city would retain road closure area 2, and it would become part of the park to the north. The smaller portion, road closure area 1, which is about 511 square meters, which is about 5,500 square feet. The applicants are requesting to buy that portion of the road from the city, and it would be at a cost of $38,800, which is item N. But collectively, both of these processes would allow for the ultimate subdivision of the property into the 5 lots as shown here. What's important to note is that the park area that we've identified on the north and the connection that comes up to Dewar is important from staff's perspective to ultimately allow for a trail network all across the slope here. Dewar Road is difficult for us to accommodate additional pedestrian features on, so we're looking at other ways to interconnect these communities. As part of this application, there'll be a paved trail that comes down Redmond Road from Dewar, and then we'll come across the property on the north side, ultimately connecting to a system on the east side of the property today. And then there's also potential in the future that there would be connections out the west as the remaining lands in that area develop, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lindsay. Perhaps I can call for the motion on item M then. Councillor Armstrong, seconded. Councillor Bonner. The first, any discussion? Councillor Turley and then Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Although, I guess in fairness, Councillor, well, we don't really care. Let him go first.
Sorry, B before T.
He never got that much done today, so he can go first.
Be kind. It's Christmas. Councillor Turley.
I've known Donald long enough, I know that isn't going to happen.
I'd be delighted to hear from you.
Anyway, getting back to serious matters. So my question through you, Your Worship, to Mr. Lindsay, is in this page 147, there's a picture of a house which looks like a swimming pool in the backyard, and that doesn't seem to conform with the original drawing on page 141 it does, but I'm a little confused as now they've got 5 lots, and that one seems to sit over 3 of them, part of them. Is that, am I confused or what?
No, Your Worship, that's a good point. There's an existing home with improvements on 5400 in order to facilitate the redevelopment of the lands, that home and the related improvements are going to be removed from the property.
Okay.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Lindsay. I have some questions about the lot sizes. Typically, the lots in this particular area are actually quite small. They tend to be single-family dwellings with not a lot of space between the sides. What is the developer's plans for these lots? I understand it's R10, and so we can go up. Is the plans to develop these as multifamily dwellings here?
Thank you, Your Worship. That's another good point that I should have mentioned. So each of the lots under R10, they're allowed multifamily based on the lot areas. In this case, the lots that are being proposed each would accommodate 2 units or a duplex. So the applicant's proposal is to construct duplex units on each of the 5 lots. I would note that certainly these lots are larger than what you've seen certainly with other single family in the neighborhood, but one of the challenges of this site is the steep nature of the property, and trying to have road frontage only on Dewar Road lends itself to the requirement for larger lots. But it's the flexibility that we have in our steep slope zone that we try to preserve density. So even though the lots are larger, the fact that they each allow for duplexes allows us to still maintain the density on these difficult to develop properties.
And the developer can put duplex on them, but they're not necessarily obligated to.
That is correct, Your Worship. They do have the ability to put something less, including a single-family home or a single-family with a suite. But in this case, I know that they've gone as far as actually doing site plans and concept drawings for these duplexes, and their existing intent is to construct duplexes on these properties.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to follow up on Councillor Bonner's decision, if that is their intention, would that be secured through rezoning? Or would the flexibility just be left
Your Worship, it would be on, you can, we could do that. We'd be more likely to secure something by covenant that was less, if it was less than what the zoning allowed for. It would be unusual to put a covenant in place that said you must go to the highest density that's allowed for under the zone. So, but you could ask for a covenant that said that each of those lots must have at least a duplex on them. Sorry, but Your Worship, just to be clear, it's not something that staff have recommended. It's not in the current motion.
Any further discussion on the first motion as recommended? Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. One other question, if I may, through you to staff. What is the community amenities contribution that we're getting on this subdivision?
Your Worship, in this case, when staff evaluated the application, it was believed that there was no, it was maintaining of density, but there was no additional density that was being granted because of the rezoning. So with no additional density, we have not secured any community amenity contributions.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion? Contrary? Motion carried. No one opposing. A motion, I need a second motion as recommended. Councillor Armstrong, seconded. Councillor Turley. Any discussion on the second motion under item M? Hearing none, all those in favor? Contrary? Motion carried. Thank you. Under item N, which is the proposed road closure part of Redmond Road adjacent to 5400 Dewar and 5351 Redmond Road. There is a recommended motion. I think we've heard from Mr. Lindsay. Someone care to make that motion? Councillor Turley.
Second.
Seconded Councillor Hemmens. Councillor Thorpe.
I'm just wondering, in terms of process, Your Worship, seeing as this involves first and second reading, if these need to be done separately.
Yes. There's items 1,
Items 1 to 5,
do them as 5 separate motions?
separately. Yeah.
All right,
Or you
All
could
right.
you could do 1 to 3 together, but the bylaw readings need to be done separately.
all right. The motion is
1 to 3.
Councillor Turley, thank you. Seconded Councillor Hemmons on motions 1, 2, 3. Any discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carried unanimously. On motion number 4 under M. Moved by Councillor Hemmons, seconded by Councillor Turley. Any discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. And I made a motion for 5 that it pass second reading. Moved by Councillor Hemmons, seconded by Councillor Brown. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We are on to item O, which is temporary outdoor public art recommendations. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you mentioned, this is for our 2019 program for temporary outdoor public art. This is a program that the city's been doing since 2010, and it allows for temporary art, primarily, not exclusively, but primarily in our downtown in Maffeo Sutton Park. There are 10 projects that are being recommended this year for a total budget of $28,000.
Councillor Martman, move the motion.
Yes, I'd like to move the motion as recommended.
Second.
Seconded Councillor Hemmons. Any discussion?
Yep.
Councillors Bonner and then Armstrong.
Oh,
sorry.
I don't think you turned me off.
And I just turned Councillor Armstrong off, but I'll turn her back on again.
That's
There we
happened
go.
lots, that's all right. I just have a question on that. There is 18 proposals and 10 picked. How come some people got 2 and others didn't get any? Is there a rationale for that? Because I'd like to think we would give different people opportunities instead of, 2 to the same peoples.
I'm sorry, Your Worship, that was done by a committee, so I'm not sure that I could properly kind of represent the thought process that was put into it by the committee recommendations, but I would say I know that staff were there and they were sure that all of the applications were vetted appropriately.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? No one opposed? Motion carried. I think this is a wonderful addition to the city, and I think the city deserves, those who've worked on this over the years deserve our compliments. On to bylaws. Sewer Regulation and Charge Amendment Bylaw 2018, number 2496, period 3.1.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that Sewer Regulation and Charge Amendment Bylaw 2018, number 2496.31, to set the 2019 rates for sanitary sewer be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you.
I'll move that Waterworks Rate and Regulation Amendment Bylaw 2018, number 7004.14, to set the 2019 water rates be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
I would move that Southwest Bulk Water Rate Amendment Bylaw 2018, number 7099.07, to set the 2019 bulk water rates for Southwest Extension be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
And I would move that Municipal Solid Waste Collection Amendment Bylaw 2018, number 7128.10, to update the bylaw for the implementation of automated garbage collection and set the rates for 2019 be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
I would move that Housing Agreement Bylaw 2018, number 7276, to authorize a housing agreement between the City of Nanaimo and the Nanaimo Affordable Housing Society pertaining to 20 Prideaux Street be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Armstrong? Oh. Right, very good. Recorded. Thank you. Gave us a little excitement towards the end of the evening here.
And, Your Worship, I would move that Housing Agreement Bylaw 2018, number 7277, to authorize a housing agreement between the City of Nanaimo and the Vancouver Island Mental Health Society pertaining to 285 Rosehill Street be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. Any discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Unanimous. Carried.
And I would move that Housing Agreement Bylaw 2018, number 7278, to authorize a housing agreement between the City of Nanaimo and the Nanaimo Affordable Housing Society pertaining to 10 Buttertubs Drive be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? None. Motion carried. And we just have a bylaw status sheet for information only. Duly noted. We have no correspondence, Ms. Snellgrove, correct? And under notices of motion, we do have some.
We have Councillor Hemmons and then Councillor Bonner.
Sorry?
Councillor Hemmons and then Councillor Bonner's notice of motion.
Okay. Duly.
Sorry, do you need me to read it out? Sorry, do you need me to read it out? Okay, I'd like to serve motion that staff develop a terms of reference for a governance and priorities committee by March 1st with the following considerations. The committee will include all members of council. The committee is intended to be an open forum for more robust discussion and debate on select priority topics, with recommendations provided to council for consideration. And the committee is intended to be a forum where guests and subject matter experts can be invited to participate in discussion.
Thank you. And Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship.
You're on now.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have three notice of motions I'd like to bring forward. Number one, that staff review the community amenity contribution calculation currently set at $1,000 per residential unit and $34 per square meter of commercial gross floor area to ensure it is consistent with current practices and market conditions and to ensure it responds to the local needs for affordable housing. Motion number two, that staff engage the arts and cultural groups who lease property from the City of Nanaimo by May 1st, 2019, to determine if groups would benefit from multi-year lease agreements in order to be eligible to apply for grant funding from senior levels of government for capital projects. And motion number three, that staff develop an implementation plan for responding to Truth and Reconciliation Call to Action number 57 for Council's consideration by July 1st, 2019.
Thank you very much. No other motions? The other business we have is correspondence from the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities regarding the 2019 Annual General Meeting and Convention for AVICC. I think that's all I have to do is note it. Question period. Do we have any questions tonight?
Santa Claus.
Mr. Whaley, you've been incredibly patient.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Merry Christmas to yourself and Council.
Thank you.
I'm on item 10D, which is the lease for VIX that you approved, and the same comments will apply to the other lease that you approved, or the same question, I should say. And just to note, I'm in agreement with this. I'm glad it's been done. It's been 12 years since VIX first asked to have their lease reworked and renewed and to do something about the situation. So it's great that it's finally happened. My question relates to the form of the lease. And I want to do what you did earlier, Your Worship, to take you back to the 1960s. I was working in Vancouver with some community organizations at the time, and I met a young lawyer by the name, I think, Ian Waddell. One of the things he was working on was trying to get leases and contracts into normal, everyday wording. It seems that a lot of that has happened. I noticed that some of the banks even have their leases in regular, ordinary wording, but it looks like that information never got across the water to Nanaimo. The lease that you're going to be signing includes several things like, like $125 fee for administration. $125 wouldn't cover anything. I have no idea why it's there. But worse than that, the wording of the lease, the wording of the lease refers to, throughout, to the city and the lessee, which is obviously technically correct. But when you look at the Bevan Park Master Plan, it refers to community partners. Community partners, it seems to me, need to be on somewhat equal footing. Obviously, there's a difference between VIX and the city of Nanaimo, but I think the lease should at least reflect the fact that it's VIX throughout in the same way that it does the city. So I'm wondering if, my question is, would council consider asking staff and or the lawyers to do the leases from this point on, at least, in plain language? It's something that's being done in a lot of places, and that's my question. Would you consider asking staff or the lawyers to do it in plain language? And just as a one additional point, if you want, I'd be happy to sit down with whoever looks after this and go through it and try and identify those things that could be changed to make it plain language, and to identify those things that appear, to me at least, to be there for no reason. I suspect they're there just because we've always done it this way. So those things, I think, should be identified, but that isn't my question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whaley. Councillor Martman.
Thank you, through the chair, too. I just want to understand, being that I work in a business where everybody would like the language of insurance to be in plain English. So the same, when you were indicating that it says the lessee, but at the beginning of the contract, it states Vancouver Island Exhibition Association is the lessee.
Of course.
So I'm wondering, was there clarification you were looking for around there? Or?
No.
Okay.
No, what I'm suggesting is that throughout the lease where it says lessee, it should be, that term should be replaced by VIX.
Okay.
So that you know that you're dealing with terms that are not legalistic jargon.
Thank you.
And that's just the one primary example. There are a number of other places in that lease where the same kind of thing applies.
Any further questions for the delegation? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Whaley. Interesting suggestion to finish the last formal council meeting of the year.
Will I get an answer?
I'm not going to guarantee that, hearing no response from council members. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Through the chair to Mr. Whaley.
Just kills me. It kills me.
I don't know if I'm not pressing something or he's not pressing something. Thank you.
You're green, Mr. Gesselbrock.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I think having things written in a language that's plain and understandable to everybody that's utilizing them is an important thing, and I think that message has been conveyed to staff, and when resources are available to start addressing this, I think it is an important thing we start looking at.
Really inexpensive.
Good.
1 hour of my time and whoever's responsible for it.
think it fair to say that Mr. Lindsay and his staff will certainly look at this, and we may get some kind of a report back from them in the new year. But Mr. Whaley, I will say, candidly, we're tasking them with a lot of other things in a very short time. So, Mr. Lindsay.
Yeah, Your Worship, I think I hear the points being raised. At the end of the day, I would say we're responsible for bringing you legal documents that we rely on primarily, that reduce the liability of the city and make sure that if we end in court, that they're clear. So they're done by our professional staff with the support of our municipal lawyers. So they may at times read with heavy legalese, but they are legal documents. We don't write leases with the idea that we advertise or share them with the community. I think there's an opportunity, if that's the intent, that we could do better explaining the importance of the lease or why we're doing a lease and the general terms of it. But that would be a separate discussion than amending a legal instrument itself.
Thank you very much.
I take it that's a no?
Thank you very much. Well, as I'm going to exercise the chair's prerogative, this is the last council meeting of 2018, and I just want to, on behalf of all the members of council, both senior and more experienced and those newly elected, express our thanks to the city staff for the work they have done in this past year and all the contributions and the assistance they've given us, particularly as a pretty fresh council, to start us on the road to governance excellence. And to likewise, as I'm sure we have many viewers at home watching tonight, to say thank you to them for participating so vigorously in the election in October and demonstrating once again that Nanaimo is a city that wants to be a happy and happening place. And Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all of you. And I would ask now for a motion for adjournment. So moved, Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Nobody opposed.